The knock before the gunfire. If you think you've seen it all, you haven't. This story will make you check your doorbell camera twice before you sleep tonight. Hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear might just be the next case the police don't want forgotten. It was a quiet Tuesday night in the small Louisiana city of Natchitoches, the kind of town where the loudest sounds after dark are cicadas and the hum of distant traffic. But on April 12, 2023, at 9:47 p.m., the neighborhood on Lakeview Drive shattered into chaos. A sudden burst of gunfire tore through the stillness. A woman across the street later told detectives she first thought it was fireworks, until the dogs started barking, and then came the screaming. Inside apartment 3B, 21-year-old Joshua Chisholm lay on the living room floor, his body twisted near the couch, blood seeping into the carpet fibers beneath him. The television still glowed with a paused video game. The controller rested just inches from his hand. By the time officers arrived, Joshua's pulse was gone. Paramedics confirmed it within minutes. The only witnesses, a dog, trembling and stained with droplets of blood, and a silent digital eye mounted above the front door, a doorbell camera. The footage became the center of everything. Detective Megan Roussel, a 10-year veteran of the Natchitoches Police Department, was among the first to review it. In the grainy black and white video, two men approached Joshua's apartment around 9:39 p.m. The taller one wore a hoodie pulled tight, his hand buried in the front pocket. The other, younger, barely more than a teenager, stood slightly behind him, glancing nervously up and down the corridor. The taller man knocked twice. Joshua opened the door after a pause, just wide enough to peek through. He looked cautious, as if expecting trouble. He said something the microphone didn't pick up. The man in the hoodie leaned closer, whispered something back, and then, the door opened all the way. 8 minutes later, the same camera captured the two men sprinting out. The younger one dragged Joshua's pit bull by the collar, shouting something unintelligible. Behind them, the door swung open to an empty hallway, light spilling out onto the concrete. Detective Roussel replayed that clip more than 20 times. Every time, she froze on one frame, the brief second when the taller suspect turned back toward the door, the faint outline of a handgun visible at his waist. The investigation began with chaos. The apartment complex buzzed with rumor, neighbors whispering about drug deals, others swearing Joshua was quiet, polite, and kept to himself. But Roussel knew something was off. On the kitchen table sat a plate with half-eaten takeout, a wallet, and Joshua's cell phone. The text messages painted a clearer picture. At 9:28 p.m., Joshua had texted a friend, "Two dudes say they want to talk business. Don't feel right." 2 minutes later, "If I don't text in 10, call someone." No one did. Detectives canvassed nearby apartments. One neighbor recalled hearing arguing, like somebody was pleading. Another swore they saw a gray Honda leaving the complex moments after the gunfire. Meanwhile, technicians extracted the doorbell footage frame by frame, enhancing the images. The younger suspect's face became visible under the streetlight reflection, high cheekbones, short dreadlocks, a thin chain around his neck. When they cross-referenced with social media, a name surfaced, Trey Duval, 17 years old. Trey's record wasn't clean. A minor burglary the year before. Some truancy. But nothing violent, until now. The taller man, however, was harder to pin down. The hoodie shadowed his face, but an insignia on his sleeve gave detectives a clue, a local roofing company's logo. That led them to Darius Campbell, a 24-year-old laborer who'd recently quit the job. When police arrived at Campbell's home 2 days later, his mother claimed he was visiting family. But his phone records told a different story, multiple calls to Trey Duval that same night, right up until 9:50 p.m. And then, silence. By the third day, arrest warrants were issued. Darius was picked up at a cousin's trailer outside Alexandria, Louisiana. Trey was found hiding at a friend's house less than a mile from the crime scene. Both denied being inside the apartment. Both claimed they had heard about the shooting but weren't involved. Detective Roussel didn't buy it. She showed them the footage. The grainy clip of two men standing outside Joshua's door. Darius leaning in. Trey fidgeting. The firearm visible for a split second. Trey's face went pale. His knee bounced uncontrollably beneath the interrogation table. He whispered, "It wasn't supposed to go that way." That's when Roussel knew, the motive wasn't random. It wasn't gang-related. It was personal. Investigators dug into Joshua's background. He dropped out of college the previous year, working part-time and selling electronics online. One of his listings, a high-end gaming laptop, had gone missing from his apartment after the shooting. It was enough to theorize a robbery gone wrong. But when forensic teams processed the apartment, they found no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints on the doorknob except Joshua's and the suspects. Joshua had let them in willingly. So why the sudden violence? The coroner's report provided one more piece. Joshua had been shot twice, once in the chest, once in the abdomen, but there were also defensive wounds on his arms. He had fought back. And the blood spatter pattern indicated the first shot wasn't fatal. He was conscious, trying to reach the door when the second bullet struck. Detective Roussel stood in that apartment days later, replaying everything in her mind, the hesitation in Joshua's voice, the 8-minute gap, the sound of his dog barking after the shots. She turned back to the camera, staring into that unblinking lens, the only witness that never looked away. In the police locker room that night, Roussel couldn't shake one detail Trey had muttered under his breath during questioning. He promised he had it. Had what? Money? Drugs? A gun? When they checked Joshua's financial records, there it was, a transfer of $2,400 to an account belonging to someone named K.D., 2 days before the shooting. The initials didn't match either suspect. But the kicker, the funds were routed through Cash App, and the profile picture was the same pit bull that had been dragged from the apartment that night. It wasn't just a robbery. It was a setup. Someone else was pulling the strings. And when detectives tried to trace the account, the trail led straight to another name, one that would blow the investigation wide open. The betrayal in plain sight. Detective Megan Roussel stared at the screen as the transaction details loaded. The $2,400 transfer had been routed to a Cash App account under the name KD, the profile showing a familiar face, not a suspect's mugshot, not a stranger, but a woman. Her name, Kendall Davis, 22 years old, local bartender, and Joshua's former girlfriend. It had been over between them for months, but text records told another story. Joshua had messaged Kendall days before the shooting, begging for a chance to make things right. She never replied, at least, not directly. Instead, a new contact under the name Trey Business appeared in his phone the same day. Motive was forming, and it was ugly. When Detective Roussel subpoenaed Kendall's phone records, the puzzle began to fit together. She'd exchanged more than a dozen calls with Darius Campbell in the week leading up to the murder, and one with Trey on the night of the shooting, just 20 minutes before Joshua was killed. Still, motive wasn't proof. Kendall wasn't on camera. She hadn't pulled the trigger. But Roussel had handled enough homicide cases to know, sometimes, the person holding the gun wasn't the one giving the order. Joshua's mother, Angela Chisholm, sat across from Roussel in the station's interview room 2 days later. Her eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. Joshua wasn't perfect, she whispered, clutching her purse. He made mistakes, but he was trying to change. Did he owe anyone money? Roussel asked gently. Angela nodded. He borrowed from Kendall. Said he'd pay her back when he sold that gaming laptop. I told him not to trust her again. She wasn't the same girl after they broke up. Got mixed up with the wrong people. Wrong people, Roussel repeated, scribbling the phrase in her notebook. Angela hesitated before leaning forward. You think she had something to do with this? The detective didn't answer. She didn't have to. That evening, Roussel drove to Bayou's Edge Bar, where Kendall worked the night shift. The place was a dim mix of cigarette haze and country music, locals nursing drinks as if time had forgotten them. Kendall stood behind the counter, her blonde hair tied up, fake smile plastered across her face as she poured whiskey for a regular. Roussel approached, flashing her badge. Detective Roussel, Natchitoches PD, mind if we talk? Kendall blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, sure. Let me finish this. They moved to a quiet corner booth. Roussel slid a printed still from the doorbell footage across the table, Darius and Trey outside Joshua's door. You know these two? Kendall's hand trembled slightly before she tucked it under the table. I've seen them around. Darius used to come here sometimes. Did you talk to him before April 12th? She shrugged. Maybe once or twice. Once or twice? Roussel pressed. Because I have your call logs showing more than a dozen conversations in the days before Joshua was killed. Including one the night it happened. Kendall froze. For a moment, the mask slipped, panic flashed across her face. Then, she smiled tightly. That doesn't mean I had anything to do with it. Maybe they wanted to find him. Maybe they were after money he owed. Roussel leaned forward, her voice low. And how much did Joshua owe you, Kendall? Kendall's expression hardened. You can't prove anything. Roussel gathered her papers calmly. Not yet. Back at the precinct, a new development broke the case open further. Forensic techs had examined Trey's phone. Hidden in his deleted messages were screenshots of Cash App transfers, including the $2,400 Joshua sent, followed by texts from Kendall reading, "You'll get your cut after it's done." The message was time-stamped April 12, 8:03 p.m., barely an hour before the murder. That was enough for a warrant. Police raided Kendall's apartment the next morning. They found $1,600 in cash stashed in a shoebox under her bed and a gray hoodie matching the one Darius wore in the footage, the same company logo visible on the sleeve. When confronted, Kendall broke down. She insisted she didn't know they'd kill him, that it was supposed to be just a scare. She claimed Joshua had promised to repay the money, then blocked her, so she asked Darius, an old friend, to talk sense into him. But Roussel knew that excuse well. It was the same line she'd heard from people who thought they could control violence, until it spiraled. Still, something didn't fit. Roussel reviewed the footage again, slowing it frame by frame. As Darius leaned toward Joshua, he seemed hesitant. His right hand stayed in his pocket, but his left gestured, almost pleading. Trey, on the other hand, kept glancing toward the camera, anxious, twitchy. It wasn't until she zoomed in on the final seconds that she noticed it, a faint reflection in the apartment window, a third shadow moving inside. Someone else had been in that apartment before the shots were fired. That detail changed everything. She ordered a deeper forensic sweep of the footage's audio. Enhanced sound waves revealed muffled voices, a woman's voice, tense, sharp, right before the gunfire. It wasn't Kendall's. But it sounded familiar. Detective Roussel pulled up Joshua's contacts again, cross-referencing social media activity. One name appeared repeatedly in his messages and photos, Lisa Gauthier, his neighbor across the hall. Lisa had called 911 that night after hearing the gunshots. But now, something about her report felt rehearsed. She'd claimed she heard yelling, but not what was said. She'd peeked through the peephole, but somehow didn't see the men leaving, even though the camera caught them in plain view. When officers questioned her again, she was evasive. Said she didn't want trouble. But a search warrant on her phone revealed the truth. Hours before the shooting, she'd texted Darius Campbell a location pin, Joshua's exact apartment number. When confronted, Lisa's story cracked instantly. She admitted she'd been in Joshua's apartment earlier that night. They'd been drinking, talking things out. She knew Kendall, too, they worked at the same bar. She claimed Kendall had offered her $200 to help set up a meeting. But Lisa didn't expect the guns. She said she'd run out the back door when things got heated. Roussel didn't know whether to believe her. The story felt half-true, like someone trying to soften their role. Still, Lisa's confession gave Roussel the missing link. Kendall hadn't just sent the killers, she'd orchestrated the entire setup, using Lisa to get Joshua to open the door without suspicion. But what no one could yet explain was why Kendall was so desperate. Why risk murder over $2,400? The answer arrived in an unexpected place, Darius's phone records. Among dozens of calls to Kendall, one stood out, a single outgoing call to a prepaid number registered out of Shreveport, just 20 minutes before the shooting. The number was traced to a burner SIM, but the voice message still worked. It was Kendall's voice. Only, she wasn't talking to Darius. She was talking about him. He's done his part. Make sure he doesn't talk. The timestamp? 2 hours after Joshua's death. Detective Roussel realized then, the story wasn't over. One suspect was already dead. 2 days after the murder, before police could arrest Darius, his car was found abandoned off Highway 6. Inside, blood on the driver's seat, a bullet hole through the window. And the same pit bull from Joshua's apartment wandering nearby, alive, but scared. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. And the next person on that list might be Kendall herself. The woman who planned everything. Detective Megan Roussel stood on the shoulder of Highway 6, watching the wind whip through the grass around Darius Campbell's abandoned car. The sun was barely up, pale light crawling over the pine trees. The scene was eerily still, one bullet hole through the driver's window, one pool of dried blood on the seat, and no Darius. Not alive, not dead. Gone. The pit bull sat near the tire, trembling, its fur streaked with mud. A tag hung from its collar, Ghost. Roussel crouched down beside it, whispering, "It's okay, buddy. You've seen enough." But Ghost had seen more than anyone could imagine. A forensic team combed through the vehicle. A single shell casing lay wedged under the brake pedal. Caliber, 9mm, same as the weapon used to kill Joshua Chisholm. Whoever shot Darius had access to the same gun. And that meant one thing: the killer was closing the circle. By midday, Roussel was back at the station, reviewing hours of phone data, piecing together the final hours before Darius vanished. His last text had been sent to Kendall Davis at 12:18 a.m., less than 3 hours before his body disappeared. The message read, "We need to talk. Not over text." Kendall replied, "You're being paranoid. Meet me at the dock if you want your share." The dock, Roussel knew that spot well. It was an old fishing pier off Cane River Lake, a quiet place teenagers used to party, far from cameras or witnesses. And Kendall had picked it for a reason. The next 48 hours were a blur of pressure and sleepless nights. The district attorney wanted an arrest before panic spread. Local headlines screamed, "Doorbell footage murder, now a double killing." But Roussel refused to move too fast. She wanted everything: phone pings, bank logs, camera feeds, the last GPS data from Kendall's car. That data cracked the case open. At 12:47 a.m., Kendall's white Hyundai Sonata pinged off a tower just a mile from the dock. 15 minutes later, it moved again, this time toward a rural road where Darius's abandoned car was found. There were no cameras out there. No lights. Just silence and swamp. But Kendall had made one mistake: a gas station stop 30 minutes before the killing. The clerk remembered her clearly. She looked nervous, he told officers. Bought a pack of gum and asked if anyone had been around the docks lately. On surveillance footage, she was wearing a gray hoodie. The same one from Joshua's murder. When detectives brought Kendall back in for questioning, she tried to play calm. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair pulled back tight, a thin line of exhaustion around her mouth. "We found your car near the docks," Roussel began. Kendall's jaw flexed. "So? I go there sometimes. Was Darius with you that night?" "No." Roussel slid a photo across the table, a still from the gas station camera. "You sure about that?" Kendall's lips parted, but no sound came. Her gaze darted to the mirrored wall, to the place where she knew people were watching. "Darius is missing," Roussel said quietly. "And I think you know where he is." Kendall shook her head. "He freaked out. He said he was going to tell the cops. I tried to calm him down." "Did you?" Roussel asked. "Because he never made it home." Silence filled the room, heavy as lead. Then Kendall whispered, almost to herself, "It was supposed to be easy. Just get the money. No one was supposed to die." "But 2 people did," Roussel replied. "And you're the only one left alive." That night, a fisherman found Darius's body floating in the Cane River, half submerged among cattails. One shot to the chest. Execution style. When police recovered the body, the bullet matched the one that killed Joshua. Kendall's 9mm. The evidence was now airtight. Kendall was arrested on charges of second-degree murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Trey Duval, the 17-year-old accomplice, turned state's witness, trading a lighter sentence for testimony. His confession painted the full picture. Kendall had orchestrated everything. She was drowning in debt, months behind on rent, and rumored to be buying pills from street dealers. She'd convinced Joshua to send her money to square things up, then realized he'd cut her off. That's when she reached out to Darius, a man she'd met at the bar who was known for collecting debts. The plan was simple: scare Joshua into paying up, take his laptop and cash, and make it look like a robbery. But when Joshua resisted, Trey panicked and pulled the trigger. After the murder, Darius wanted to confess. Kendall couldn't risk that. She lured him out to the docks under the guise of paying his share, and shot him with the same weapon. Her mistake was thinking the investigation would stop with his body. The trial took almost a year to begin. By then, the story had made national headlines: the doorbell footage murder, captivating audiences across the country. Everyone had seen the grainy video of 2 men knocking, unaware that the camera above them was recording the beginning of their end. In court, the footage played again and again, hauntingly silent except for the sound of distant crickets. Kendall sat stone-faced as prosecutors replayed her messages: "You'll get your cut after it's done." The jury took less than 3 hours to convict her. Life in prison without parole. But Detective Roussel never celebrated the verdict. Because one question still haunted her. Weeks after the trial, Roussel returned to the evidence locker. She rewatched the original doorbell footage one last time. But something strange caught her eye, a reflection in the glass door as Kendall's hired men fled the scene. A car idling in the background. Headlights dimmed. A different vehicle than Darius's. License plates partially visible, but not enough to read. When she enhanced the frame, The shape matched a familiar model, a black sedan registered to Kendall's manager at Bayou's Edge Bar. The same man who'd testified she was at work all night the evening of the murder. Roussel requested a quiet follow-up. The manager's name was Clint Broussard, 38, a man with a criminal past, minor drug charges, assault, nothing major. He'd told reporters he barely knew Kendall. But bank records said otherwise, $3,000 transferred to his account the day after the killing. When questioned, Clint denied involvement. That money was for rent, he said. But under pressure, his story cracked. He admitted Kendall had come to him days before the murder, begging for help to teach Joshua a lesson. Clint introduced her to Darius and Trey. After the murder, Kendall paid Clint to get rid of the gun, the same weapon police never recovered. Clint's cooperation earned him immunity. But he sealed Kendall's fate even deeper. She wasn't a victim of circumstance. She was the architect. The puppeteer behind every move. When the case finally closed, Detective Roussel sat alone in her office, the case file spread across her desk. The headline still trended online, the doorbell footage that solved a murder. She pressed play on the footage one last time. 2 men. 1 door. A bark in the background. And in that tiny reflection of glass, all the lies, greed, and betrayal that ended 3 lives in one night. Roussel whispered under her breath, "You thought the camera was your witness. But it was your confession." The screen went dark. If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for what's next. Hit subscribe, because the next case will make you question everything you see.